Alright guys, today we are going to be talking about one-point perspective with using reference in particular. So I just want to say a quick message if you guys are watching this and you've been watching my other videos. I'm not doing live this week. Maybe I'll get back to it next week, but just last week there was such a lag issue that I thought it would just be better if I recorded. And then this way I can kind of edit and make these videos maybe a little bit quicker too. So we'll see how that works, and you guys can let me know in the comments or when we talk later how you like that process better or worse. Um, but anyways, jumping into this, so we went over the basics of one-point perspective last week, but now we're going to talk about why is it important to use reference, right? So if we look at this little comic I made here, um, the reason we use reference is because drawing from our imagination is great. It's also a really great tool, especially when you have a lot of knowledge and reference in your head already from previous experience from drawing things. But also, when we try to draw from our imagination and we're trying to draw something realistic, so to speak, we're going to leave out a lot of details that we just might not think of in the moment. So even though this comic is kind of silly and simplistic, but it's like saying if you were trying to draw a flower and you forgot what the petals look like or that the flower had leaves. And so it would just be more helpful and you'd be able to create a more realistic picture if that was your ideal output if you had that reference. It could be a picture, it could be the actual object, right? Like this guy has the actual flower there on the stool. Um, it could be anything. For our purposes today, we're doing perspective and we're looking at cityscapes like we did last week. So we're going to be using pictures. So for my first picture, I wanted to show you guys how to break these images down to kind of figure out, if you remember last time we talked about the horizon line, the vanishing point. Um, and so how do we find those in these pictures, right? Like looking at this picture, I can tell that my horizon line is going to be pretty low because the camera of the perspective of this picture is looking up, right? So whoever took this picture took the picture looking up, which puts my horizon line a little bit lower. So what I can actually do is I can use my tools, right? If I have my ruler here, and I can find these lines that look like they're going towards the middle of the page, and I can just line my ruler up with those lines here, and then just take that line somewhere to the middle, go to the building on the other side, right, line it up with another line of the building, right there, and then bring another line down. And so right there where the X's merge together, right where they meet, right in the middle, that's where my horizon line is going to be. So you can see it's actually pretty close to where the street already shows it, but because there's cars and buildings and stuff in the way in the background, you don't always want to just guess. So I'm going to put my horizon line right down there. Let me change the color so we can see it. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now if I put my ruler away, there we go. The green line is the horizon, and then the red line were just my lines that would be merging from the outside. So realistically, this is just something you might do if you printed out your reference, or you could even do this over your screen if you save the picture or downloaded the image and you go to edit and you have that pen tool, you can do this. We're not using this to trace, we're just kind of using this to have an idea of like, okay, if I was going to draw this picture, my horizon line would be super low, right? Because I'd have all this picture space above for these really high skyscrapers. And then it also shows me exactly where my vanishing point would be, which is right there where those lines meet. Okay, so if I went over this again with the picture that I'm going to use, right? So I was looking around, I found this picture. Just so you guys know, I just kind of Google image like city views or city photography. And a lot of city photography is going to be really great one-point perspective inspiration. So looking at this one, I just thought this was interesting, especially speaking about references. There's just things you don't think about all the time, right? Like I wouldn't even think to add these flags or like whatever's happening with this ceiling is really interesting too, where it's like a glass ceiling, but it's kind of coming up to a point at the top. And then of course all these pillars on this side. It just adds a lot more dimension to your picture if you can um, use references like this. And you don't have to add everything, but just to kind of have an idea. So breaking this one down, let me switch back to my red. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use, I think for this one, these lines on the floor. Let's line that up. That looks about right there. Okay. There we go. Okay. And I'll go all the way over there. And now I come to the other side. So I just gotta move my ruler this way. Right. And we're gonna line it up with the line there. If you guys have a digital software, sometimes it gets buggy and the ruler starts sliding. Don't know why. Still moving, I'm not even touching the screen. Okay, here we go. Somewhere around there, maybe a little more. Okay, perfect. And then I can bring that up there. So we can see now that the X's merge together right there in that point. So I can bring my ruler up right where they meet, and somewhere there is good enough. And then I can just bring across my point, right? I'll make it nice and thick. And so this is my horizon line. Okay, so looking at this picture versus the other picture, almost a little more even, right? It looks like I have a little more space here than I have here. The horizon line's a little bit lower. And if I look into the picture and I'm wondering why the floor is not touching here and here, it looks like somewhere around here the floor actually starts to dip and go down, right? Like on an incline. But again, I'm just using this as reference, so that's not that big of a deal to me. I can always just take that out. I don't have to add the incline part into my picture because that would just be a whole new can of worms to deal with, right? And we're just trying to focus on how can we use reference to create our own picture. So I really like this hallway image. This is what I'm going to aim for. Okay, so I'm going to get these lines off of here and I'm going to move this reference to the side of my canvas. Because again, I'm not trying to trace this, I just wanted to have a little bit of a breakdown to better understand the picture. So we can shrink this down a little bit, and then I'm going to move it over here, and I can refer to that for reference as I need to. Okay, so that's off to the side. And we are good to go there. So I'm going to do on one layer here, or if you guys are doing this all on paper, you're going to do nice and light, right? Because this is going to be stuff that we eventually want to erase at the end. I'm going to draw my horizon line. And if you remember, when I first broke this down, I knew that there was a little more space at the top, less space at the bottom, right? But it wasn't too huge of a difference. But I do definitely want to make sure there's plenty of space for that really nice ceiling at the top. So I'm going to do mine with a nice bright color so you guys can see still. Okay, so there's my horizon line, and you guys can see I tried to less room, more room, right? And now we need to decide on our vanishing point, which I'll do as a light blue maybe. Should be good. And again, I'm just going to try to, it seemed like it was pretty much in the middle of the page like a standard perspective picture, so I'm just going to try to aim somewhere in the middle. It doesn't need to be perfect. Find my spot and put it in there. I can kind of cross-reference and look. Looks pretty even to me. Maybe I'll move it over just a little to the left. That's good enough. Again, because I'm using the reference to my advantage and making my own picture, so it's not that big of a deal if it's a little bit off from the actual picture, and then it just turns more into my own image, right? Alright, so now we get to build. So that's going to be my underline. And now I'm going to build on top of that. So what I want to do is I see a lot of lines going on in this reference, right? We can see, let's see, am I on the right layer? Not showing up. Oh, right, I can't draw on that. So, okay. So there's a lot of lines going on in that reference. You got the tiles on the floor, the lines in the ceiling, the pillars going towards the center, right, leading to that big ol' exit there. And I kind of like the idea of the exit or the wall there, where the person in the end is able to leave, because then it doesn't just become one of those perspective pictures where everything just disappears, seemingly unrealistic in the distance, right? Like things don't on it just tend to end. Usually there's kind of a surface or something in the way. So what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to decide based off of my reference where I want the sides of those walls to start, the bottom where the wall meets the ground, right? So let me choose a color here. Maybe we can do like a nice faded kind of purple color. Okay. So it looks like maybe just a little bit above the corner of my page is a good start. I'm going to bring that all the way to the line. And remember, these are maybe just guidelines. Draw these nice and light. Some of these might turn into your actual lines and you can darken them later. But definitely keep them light. Because you don't, if you want to get rid of them in the end, you don't want them to be so hard that everyone sees the guidelines, right? And then, boom, that one goes down. Okay. So this is my floor now. Okay. And I can come in here and start adding details if I want. What I really want to focus on, and let me get the picture back over here so I can show you guys, is if you guys can see right here, this area, that shows me where these two pillars are actually meeting because they're right next to each other, left and right. So I don't have to guess like where do each one of these pillars go, because I can kind of place them as long as they're in a straight line from each other. So get rid of that, get this picture out of the way. Whoop, wrong one. Okay, move over. All right. So coming back to this. So what I'm saying by that is like that stripe that's on the ground where the tile stops and there's that black strip. I'm gonna come up here and with my ruler, and I'm gonna say it happens just probably like right there. That'll be my first one. I'm gonna create that line, and then I get to decide how far I want this to be apart. And that looks good. I don't want to go too wide because I want to make this hallway seem nice and long. Right, and so that gets to be my deciding part of where the pillars are. But I do remember too, if you guys look at the reference, there's also that dark stripe on the ground right next to where the wall meets the pillars. So now what I can do is come in right next to the line that I already created where I decided that's where the wall starts. And I'm going to add that line too, because again, these are the little details that we're using the reference for. So might as well get them in there, right? Right, so I got that one. Let's come over here and try to create a similar one. Wow, this ruler is horrible. Adobe Fresco, you need to step your game up. What is going on? Just keep sliding on me. Okay, that'll be good enough. All right. So now we got that line, okay, and I'm gonna start building my pillars up. You want to always start with simple shapes. Like, let's look back at this reference. I know that this pillar goes up and it gets intricate at the top, but we want to just pretend like it's just a square for now, and then if we choose to carve those details into it later, we can make that choice, but we don't need to overcomplicate, especially when this is maybe the first time you guys are doing a drawing like this. Try not to overcomplicate too much. Okay, so I am going to, right from where that line meets, I'm going to bring a line up all the way to the top, and I'm going to go over to the next one, try to line it up the best I can, and then go up all the way to the top. Alright, and since we know the other side's going to be the exact same, I can bring the ruler over, and we can do the same thing. Cool. Alright, so little details that I want to come back to now. We have more pillars going off into the distance, right? So I can set that up and kind of decide how far. It looks like there's, if you look at the reference, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 of these similar type of pillars against the wall. So I can decide, I know I have this pillar, how far do I really want these pillars to go? And I'd say probably no farther than here. I think maybe a little bit. That's probably good. And then, so I'm going to give myself a line there. And so I know then that I need to fit in my 3 pillars inside this shape, right? Now, since it's 4, it gives us a nice even number. So we can kind of figure that out if we already have this shape in here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to split this into 4. Before we do that, though, we want to make sure what we do on one side, we do on the other. So let's go ahead and make sure that if we decided where the pillar ends on one side, let's make sure it ends on both sides. Okay. All right. And so what we're going to do is a trick. We're going to do what we did last time to find the middle of a square in perspective. And this is just going to help us split it because we have 4 pillars, and we could technically use the technique that we used for finding the lighting posts or the electrical lines last time, but this is such a small space. It would be a lot easier if we just kind of divide this into 4s and we just have to find the equal parts. So we're going to come all the way to the far side of the pillar that we created over here, right? And we're going to line it up with this corner right here. And so I'm just going to create that X, okay? Make sure you're drawing this nice and light with the pencil because you're definitely going to be erasing these lines. Probably right after you make them too, just so they don't get too confusing. I'll erase them on my side too. And then you're going to create that top part of the X, right? So we go corner to corner. And if you remember now, if we just bring our ruler straight up and down, and I go right through the middle of that X, that's the center of this square. Right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this the center of my second pillar in my picture. Before I do that though, what I'm going to do is I want to come in now and erase the lines that I made for my X. Okay, so I'm just going to erase them nice and quick. So we're not spending too much time if this eraser wants to work. There we go. Just enough that you guys aren't getting confused by my gigantic X here. And we only have to find these lines too on one side, because then once we find it on one side, it'll let us know where they should be on the other side, which is kind of nice, right? We don't have to think about it twice. Okay, before I find the thickness of this second pillar, I want to find that third pillar. And we already have the fourth pillar already done for us. So all I'm going to do now is go and make an X from here to here. And from the other corners, right? And now we're going to bring our ruler straight up and down and go through the center of that X right there. Okay. So put my ruler away for a second, and then go ahead and make sure you erase that X right after you use it, because you don't want it to get confusing and start thinking that it's part of your building. That's what always happens to me. That's why I like to use different colors sometimes too. Perspective definitely has a lot of tools that you can utilize, but sometimes they do get kind of confusing on your page. Okay, but now we have 4 spaces that exist in space. But remember, this one and this one are just going to be like, and this one too are also just kind of the spine of our pillars, and now we get to make the actual thickness of our pillars. Looking back at the reference, you can see that I see a good amount of space in between this first pillar here, where it shows me that door. In the second one, I also see a good amount of space. And then in this third gap right here, I barely see any space between these two, right? There's just a little sliver of a line, which is maybe another door. So that tells me that I can start my second one I can make bigger, and then the third one smaller, and then the final one smallest, right? So gotta pop out my ruler tool again and make some choices. So we're trying to decide on the second one first. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, this is the middle of my second one. I'm going to have it come maybe about here, down, and then just over. I'm going to make it let it go a little bit longer on this side, I think, and up like that. And then what you want to do now is erase that center spine of it, because again, these lines can get very confusing if you don't get rid of them right away. Okay, so now we have pillar 1 and 2. Okay, so it's still looking a little confusing, so we got a lot of lines going on here. So now I'm going to go to the next one. Bear with me if this looks really confusing. I understand, and I'm going to do my best to find it. So I'm going to put another line right here. And now I get to decide how thick I want this one to be. And remember, it just needs to be thinner than the second one. And certainly thinner than the first one. Because remember, it's going away in space. So as things go away, they get smaller, right? Cool. So we got that one. Let's erase that line. Okay. Using my eraser tool here, so even though I'm going digital, I'm sure it looks just as messy as any paper that we're erasing on. So now we have 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to find that last one. So I know that the last one, this is actually right where the last one ends. So the thickness of it is going to come this way. And if I remember looking at my reference, there was really just a tiniest gap between them. So as long as I can keep that gap small and make the fourth one look just a little bit thinner than the third one, I think we should have achieved it. There you go. Let me erase this circle I made here. Out, and this is number 4. Okay, so now we have the 4 pillars, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and you can see that they're each varying degrees of thickness. 3 and 4 are very similar to each other. If you guys want, we can always go in there too and make it just a little bit smaller. It's just like I feel like it's okay. I'm actually gonna go and erase it and make it a little bit smaller just because I really want to force that perspective. Okay, and again, it's my picture, so I get to play around with it as I want. I'm only using the reference as a guide to keep me on the right track. Okay, so right there. Let's see how that looks. Oh yeah, much better. Okay, so now if you remember, I said once we find them over here, we don't need to do the same process on the other side, right? And I'm sure you guys are all saying yay, because that was kind of confusing, which is the name of the game when it comes to perspective. But if you guys just kind of like take your time and figure it out, it does make sense. But now I'm just going to bring my lines over all the way to the wall. Line that one up where the line meets the floor. Line over. Okay. And we just keep moving our ruler up the wall. And bring those pillar lines over. So now we take all the guesswork out of finding the pillars on this side, right? So bring your ruler straight up and down, and now we get the satisfying part of just finding the pillars on this side much easier by just meeting that line and bringing a straight line up. Go. It's a little bigger than that. Okay. Alright, so now it's easy to get lost here, right? So I think it would help too if we could number them, because I'm getting lost myself. So I'm going to go 1, and then we know there's a gap, and then 2, right? And I know there's a gap, and then 3, and then of course the smallest one after the gap is 4. Okay? And so just like that, we have our pillars kind of figured out. And so this is that first part of the picture. Now, I'm going to keep moving through my picture just to do a little bit more, and then hopefully this will give you guys your idea to kind of continue it on your own. And then I'll just kind of speed up the process after, so you guys can watch me bring this to somewhat of a finished line drawing, and then hopefully we can share with each other our own drawings, and then we can see where everyone got. Okay, so let me go ahead and finish up what I want out of mine. So one thing I want to say too, before I let you guys tackle this on your own, is the horizon line is always going to be above the floor. Okay, like especially in a hallway like this, like you want to imagine the horizon line is it's where the earth is starting to turn, right? So the earth would definitely be going. I would definitely see much more earth going past this hallway, right? Because this hallway is just such a little space that exists within me, in front of me. So deciding that where I want that to be is going to be an important figure. I'm thinking somewhere around here looks good. And I know it's going to be in between those converging lines right there. So that also helps me out too. And I can see that the ceiling is definitely much higher, right? It looks like a really high up doorway. So that I can play with as well. Looks like maybe not too high, because I do want to show a lot of ceiling still. If I make my the exit or the flat part of this building too high, I won't be able to play with that ceiling so much. So I'm going to decide maybe right here is good. And I'm just going to give myself a little line there. And I'm going to bring my ruler straight up and down. Keep going. There we go. And line it up here and up. And go. And that's where my doorway is going to be. Now, if you guys want to, if you guys can look at this reference, it kind of looks like that roof, it does a little bit of a vault at the top, right? It kind of has an arch. And you can see that there's still a square shape right there. So if we wanted to add that, because that's the details that we're using our reference for, right? So let's add that. Let's what we're going to do here is we're going to make the end part a little bit, bring it in a little more, right? So I'm just going to bring a line up this way, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to try to match that thickness best I can over here. Maybe a little thicker. Doesn't need to be perfect. Right over here. And then I know at the top the doorway doesn't go quite as high. Come on, ruler. There we go. And I'm going to bring that line here. Okay. So, lines that I need to erase from this point is I can erase this line. I can erase this line. And I can come in here and erase these guys. They're not really helping me out with anything at this point. Okay, so it kind of looks like we have a door within a door right now, right? But we're going to create that arch. And I want that arch to come like this way and this way. But I want to make sure that it's perfect, right? We're looking straight at this thing, so we're going to try to get the center. And then, so you guys should know by now, right? Because I just did this over on the wall when we were finding the pillars, is we're going to create that X. That's how we're going to find that center. And since this, let's see. We're going to create that X down, other way. Just like so. Okay, good enough. Okay. Alright, and then straight up and down, and I bring that vertical line down through the center here. And that's going to let me know where my perfect center is. Technically, it's right where the vanishing point is, but I just wanted to make sure, double check. Looks like it's a little bit to the side of it, which is fine. It doesn't have to be exactly where the vanishing point is. And now I'm going to use that as my point of finding out where to start my arch. And remember, I want my arch to start on the same in the same places on both sides, right? So maybe I'll decide, okay, I want my arch to start here and here. Okay, I can hide my ruler. And so now it's just going to be my part of creating. If you guys have an arching tool or a round edge or a French curve or something like that, that would really help. And you're just going to try your best to create a nice arch there. I'll call it good. Good. Okay. And then if you want to make sure it's even, what you can do is you can check these spaces right here and here, see if those look about the same, and then the same with checking this one and this one. It looks like mine's a little bit off, but for the purpose of this, it's pretty good. And again, if this is confusing you, just go ahead and erase the lines that you don't want. Right, we don't need these guidelines anymore. Probably could keep that center line for dividing the door later, but I'll just keep it right there. Okay, and I can also erase this part of the beginning of our drawing too, because we don't need that part anymore either. Which is pretty cool. Once you kind of start dwindling the picture down to just the details you need, you start to really see all the details you put in pop out. Okay, so now I have this doorway at the end of our hallway. And again, I want to put in that ceiling, and this will probably be the last thing I do, and then I'll speed the video up for you guys so you guys can kind of just see me finish this. But let's go ahead and look over at the reference again really quick. So it has that really nice dark line going down the center here, and it's a little bit off from the center, because if you can see, it's going from left, and it's coming in a little bit to the right, Then we have these nice lines on the side, and I can even use perspective to find the placement of these light bulbs if I wanted to add them. Okay, so let's get a little bit of that in here. If I bring my ruler straight up and down, and if I was going to make this building completely perfect, I would have my ceiling line up right here. Okay, but I don't think that's interesting to make everything completely perfect. It kind of makes things more interesting and more natural to show that they're a little bit off-center. Whoever the photographer of this picture wasn't standing exactly in the center of the hallway. So you get a little bit of an off-kilter here, and it's a nice detail to add onto your picture. So I'm just going to tilt my ruler ever so slightly. Nothing crazy, but I do want it to just be a little off from the center, just like that. See, I'm creating the tiniest bit of a slant there. Okay. All right. And then now we're going to create the two sides. So I'm going to go right from here. I think looks good to me. It looks like a good thickness. I think that's saving enough room for the tops of the other building as well. Okay. And then we come over here with our ruler, and we're going to try to create, just looking visually here, we're going to try to see if we can create that same thickness between them. That looks about right to me. We can check after. It's close enough. One side's a little bit thicker, but that's okay. And then from here too, what we're going to do is create the final part of our ceiling, which is of course going to converge with the corner of that door. And it looks like if I'm looking at my reference, it goes right above that fourth pillar. Whoop, I need to line that up with my vanishing point better. Oh, okay, so on my picture, it would actually be cutting the top of that fourth pillar off, which that's okay. So that'll be a detail on my picture that I add over the reference, right? And let's see how it looks on this side. Okay. Boom. That side worked out. All right. So now I have my ceiling in there. And you guys can see we have a nice amount of dimension here. And then I can just start I can keep doing this. I can keep at it. I can start adding the lines on the floor. I can add more pillars. I can add tiles on the wall, windows, doors in between the pathways and stuff like that, right? So we have a good sense of like, here's the wall, here's our floor, and here's our ceiling. And that's essentially what we're trying to get at when we're doing this picture, right? So I'm just going to add a little bit more to this. I'm not going to go crazy into detail, but just kind of speed this up from here and let you guys see how I would break this down.